Okay, new research suggests I think waste heat from data centers could warm between 3.5 and over 6 million UK homes by 2035. From your perspective, how realistic is that opportunity and what would need to change to make it happen?
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's realistic if policy would change. Policy doesn't change, it's not realistic at all. Um, I think, I mean, we've had some recent experience with the energy for waste sector and how they need to produce a power and heat plan for planning permission. And I think all the high energy users and high waste heat producers need, as part of the planning legislation, need to come up with an idea of how they're going to use this waste heat and not just dump it. And I think data centers are a good example. If they just go in isolation and just eat up all the electricity and then dump all the heat from cooling, then it's a complete waste, and how anybody could call that green or adding any particular wealth or benefit to the community is beyond me. So the if planning could legislate that any new data center or green hydrogen production or anything that throws away a lot of heat must, if the local authority or a heat network company asks for it, must make it available. It can be no cost to them. It can be a relatively cost neutral thing, or they could purchase the heat. The heat network company could purchase the heat, and that could pay for the any additional heat pumps or whatever it might be to uplift the waste heat to usable temperatures. So there's plenty of ways of doing it, but the important bit is the legislation and the understanding of the otherwise wasted opportunity that would arise if we continue to let these industries dump heat into the atmosphere.
Yeah, and the report highlights the need for heat highways to capture and distribute the waste heat. What does that infrastructure look like in practice, and how sort of easily and maybe more importantly, how early should it also be considered in terms of data center planning?
So a heat highway is a little bit similar to your gas transmission line or your high voltage electrical transmission line. So it's a transmission pipe that carries heat long distances from where it's readily available and takes it to areas that have got all the demand but no heat source. And so you're just marrying up. And that's what heat networks were invented to connect areas with surplus heat with areas of large demand. And so that's what a heat highway or heat transmission line is. It's chicken and egg, I guess. But in East Lothian, for example, we've got there's proposals for a heat highway from an energy for waste plant and a tarmac cement works, 30 miles up towards Edinburgh, and then deep. The opportunity of that, Edinburgh's the high demand. Dunbar has got all the industry with the high or surplus heat. And so you're marrying the two up. And the benefit of doing that is you can then start to decarbonize on the way in to Edinburgh. All the towns and villages that are struggling to decarbonize, they can be decarbonized en route. And we see this quite a lot in Denmark. Copenhagen's heat network in Denmark is currently looking at expanding another 40 miles to pick up more vast amounts of waste heat and take that 40 miles towards Copenhagen. Copenhagen's heat network is already 60 miles wide by 40 miles high. So it superimpose that onto Scotland and you've covered the whole central belt from Glasgow, Edinburgh and Stirling. So that's the sort of scale and mentality that's possible. And it's only possible if we've got that abundance of waste heat. So you're looking out for data center areas. Data centers love or need areas where you've got a massive amount of electricity available. So you have to have electricity. Generally, that's going to be either near wind farms or near where wind offshore meets land and that sort of stuff. And that generally tends to be far away from the city. So the two start to work together, and then you can transport this heat from areas that are not where people live. Nobody wants to live beside industrial estates and areas with large waste heat. The same way nobody wanted to live beside power stations. That's why they're all outside the city centre. Nobody wanted to live beside them. Gas plants, all this industrial stuff is always in the outskirts. So this idea of bringing the heat in. So chicken and egg. If there was an existing heat source like we have in Dunbar, then you could get the heat network in or the heat highway in straight away. Data centers then get attracted to areas that have got those heat highways already in place and access to electricity because it makes them green. Their green credentials then stack up because they're using wind electricity for the green electricity and they're not dumping the heat. They're providing a service to the community because they're providing cheap heat, decarbonized heat for the people that live near or in the area of data centers. So planning is absolutely crucial. If you don't have if a data center is going into an area that doesn't already have a lot of waste heat, then by all means, the heat highway can go in to serve that data center, and then the local authority can start looking at attracting other industry around that area. So you're not reliant on one heat source. You're not reliant if the data center goes pop tomorrow and decides to pack up. You've got no heat. So the idea between the heat highway and long distance, large networks is that you can pick up any amounts of waste heat. Now, the data center could be the enabler, and then the local authority starts attracting people into that industrial cluster that share the same amount of waste heat and share the ambition to use that heat for good and not just to dump. So that's it comes back to the political will, the political ambition. This isn't a technical problem. It's not even a financial problem. There's green money out there waiting to invest. National wealth funds, the Scottish National Investment Bank. Their biggest problem with heat is that people are coming with too small a request. 5, 10 million pounds here, 20 million. It's not big enough for the pension funds, the green money. They want hundreds of millions, and then they get their ears prick up and they get interested. That's the sort of kind of landscape that we potentially have. So all the pieces, the data centers, the finance, the need for green heat, the need for cost effective and affordable green heat. It's all coming together, and I just hope the politicians open their eyes and open their ears and listen and understand the potential we have here is something fantastic. We get this right.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of what's happening at the moment, are today's data centers being designed at all with heat reuse in mind? And sort of part two would be, should heat export capability, do you think, become a standard design requirement for, certainly for obviously for new
Yeah.
facilities?
I think that the norm is still not to consider heat. There was one knocked back in Edinburgh lately, and it got knocked back because it was accused of greenwashing, and there was not one single mention of the waste heat, and yet it was in an area that had that was a I can't remember the size of the network. It was 50,000 homes it could have heated, and it was just they were just going to throw that away. Now I can guarantee you, if the planning permission had gone in with the ability to heat 50,000 homes with very affordable cheap heat, green cheap heat, then the planning officers may have looked upon it differently. So the data centers need to wake up to the possibility and the how that could help throw a few decisions their way. Because it's another added benefit that is currently being forgotten about and not used. Now, there are exceptions. Deep Green, data center company that put a little data center into the swimming pool in Portsmouth, I think it was, and that heated the swimming pool. They also talk about in one of their videos about how robots are going to save the world. I don't know whether you've seen it, but it's a very good watch. And they say, well, not exactly robots, but the AI that is behind the robot from the AI data center, and how if AI data centers can facilitate decarbonizing heat without the need for individual heat pumps, then the electricity saved from needing individual heat pumps in everyone's home can be used in the data center to provide cheap decarbonized heat. So it's the win-win. So so there are some data center companies out there that are getting it, but I think it's still a minority.
Yeah, and to your point there, the research I think points to clusters of data centers. I'm in Manchester, for example, and close to major housing developments and fuel poverty hotspots. So You've already referenced it, but I don't know if you want to say a bit more just how important is geographic planning when it comes to unlocking waste heat potential.
Yeah, I mean I mean, I've seen that mapping of data centers mapped against fuel poor areas, and there's a very close correlation. Uh, I can't quite work out, or I don't understand why the correlation. No one has explained that or haven't looked into that much depth, but there is a correlation where these data centers are going and where there's fuel poverty. And so it again, it would seem almost criminal to allow those data centers to go in and throw away the heat when people next door are freezing and dying in their homes in the winter because they don't have enough heat. And we're allowing this, to throw. So that's a very powerful and political message that needs to be told. I can't imagine any politician of any color, any persuasion, that would say no to kind of cheap decarbonized heat at the same time as making your industry more efficient and the waste not want not attitude that served us so well in the past that we seem to have forgotten. That needs to come back, and the politicians need to get a grip of this and start legislating for it. And the advantage of the heat highway, and to kind of finish on the point about the location, the heat highway allows you to transfer that heat 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles, or in Copenhagen's example, even 100 miles. So the distance between where the location of the data center and where the heat demand is almost irrelevant.
Okay, yeah, and you mentioned obviously Europe and Denmark there in particular, so they're already doing this on quite a large scale. Are there any particular lessons that the UK can learn from these established models?
Speaking with the Danes, they will admit that when they started off their heat networks, they had plenty of heat networks before the oil crisis, but that in the 70s and 80s that accelerated, because Denmark was importing all their oil from OPEC, and they didn't have gas or coal, so they were pretty much on their knees, and so they went down this energy efficiency. Let's stop throwing away heat. Let's pump it into our towns and villages. And the mistake that they would admit to is that they didn't think big enough at the start. So they were looking after that small village or that district in the town. They would look after that, and now they're getting to a stage. Now they're thinking of transmission scale and large scale. And if they'd done that from the start, they would have done things slightly differently, and then they would have got they wasted a lot of industrial waste heat that otherwise could have been captured just because it wasn't on the doorstep. So they would now look at going back and say, okay, let's not worry about distance. Let's just get those pipes in the ground. If industry is going to be 10 miles, 20, 30 miles from the city, so be it. Let's grow that industry and give them a route to decarbonize their process by using their waste heat and making them profitable and green and in the eyes of the world a good company to invest in. So that from a growing jobs and growing wealth, from that political persuasion, there's a good argument. And from the social fuel poverty, nobody left behind idea, you've got the cheap heat into people's homes. So I do think there's everything. There's a little bit of something for every political color that we can all surely get behind and agree and not fight and just get this done.
And Ofgem, I think it's set to regulate heat networks from this year, indeed, I think, isn't it? And
Yeah.
there's also the introduction of the Heat Network Technical Assurance Scheme standards. Do you believe that the sort of current policy framework is strong enough to I guess encourage what you're talking about, or do you think it still falls short?
Yeah. It there's a danger of we do need heat networks need regulation, absolutely 100%, and the consumers need protected because there was during the Ukraine war and the energy crisis there was no cap on heat networks, and so they got stung. I know of a heat network in Edinburgh that was going from 4.5 pence a kilowatt hour to over 30 pence a kilowatt hour after Ukraine because there was no cap. Now that needs change, and I think that is changing, and there will be, I believe, the cap coming in for heat networks to be on that same cap as residential. And I've heard they were talking about it. I hope that is coming in, but that's the sort of thing that is necessary. The heat network, so that would be an Ofgem thing, and I fully support that. The heat network technical assurance scheme is tricky because you want to encourage heat networks. You don't want to put too onerous demands on new heat networks or existing heat networks that are doing very nicely and providing very affordable heat to people. Adding extra layers of red tape onto those guys adds extra cost onto the price of heat. So ironically, the network technical assurance scheme ends up putting extra money onto the price of heat that the people they're trying to protect are having to pay more. So we have we have a theory on that in that if your heat network can provide a price of heat that is below a certain level, and that level can change depending on whatever, but if you're below that level, then you're doing something right, and you don't need to worry. Once you go above that, then you need to be regular. Then you need to, someone needs to go in and have a look under the bonnet to
Yeah.
see what's going on. But don't punish schemes that are already doing a very good job in providing cheap heat with additional red tape that's clearly unnecessary.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think earlier about the scale, necessary to attract finance. Who would, long-term finance, pension funds, and even, I guess, GB Energy, which
Yeah.
has been announced. I'm not sure how much progress has been made, but I mean, how bankable are large-scale heat networks, and is there anything in particular that would make them more attractive to the investment community?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, heat networks have got a steady revenue. Everyone needs heat and always will do. So they'll always have a revenue coming in. So they always have to be investable because there's a steady guaranteed income coming in. How profitable and how much of a return on your investment you would get is we're getting into dangerous territory. And there's a territory, private heat networks. I worry that private heat networks will cherry pick all the easy targets, the hospitals, maybe a school, maybe some big houses where there's a lot of demand. What they would, if they were purely doing it on a ROI basis, why would they go into fuel poor areas where the price of connection is so expensive because you've got hundreds of small connections and each connection uses very little heat, and so it's a lot of expense to get so little back, and so you end up bypassing unless there was a social contract or some sort of the council or local authority had some sort of golden handshake or some sort of majority share. Um, so I think that idea, and we see that in Denmark and other places where you get the not for profit. So you can still take loans, you can still take investments, and you can pay that back. But the network is run to provide the cheapest possible heat to people and connect as many people as possible. So you can still, and any profits that are made are then put into either increasing the efficiency of the network, expanding the network, or providing a cheaper price the following year. But that comes after you're paid your interest on your loans. So the private sector can come in and feed finance into that model. What I am more worried about is the private company owning the whole thing, because I just don't see how they would have the will or the want to go into the fuel poor areas and connect the people that need it the most. So yeah, it's a difficult. I know Denmark and certainly now the Netherlands have got policy that they have a loan fund that is guaranteed by government, and I think it's a 40-year, up to 30 or 40-year payback, guaranteed loan in low interest rates because it's backed by government, and they use that money then to as seed money to feed into the heat networks, and that sort of model I can see working very well. Or you can maybe get some sort of 50-50 joint venture. I know Midlothian Energy Limited, a joint venture between Vattenfall and Midlothian Council. And so the council have got a 50% share in that. So it's up to them to make sure that vehicle goes into those poor areas. But they're struggling. They haven't connected any poor areas yet. They've done all new build
Right.
and are looking at going to a hospital and stuff. So that's my fear, is it's too expensive for the private world to connect to the people that need it most.
And in terms of data centers, I mean, I think Microsoft, I mean, plenty of them, yeah, have the messages, but Microsoft, say they want data centers to be good neighbors. Do you think providing waste heat to local communities, as you outlined, is should become part of the industry sort of social license to operate, and without it, they should be turned away? What were just your thoughts, I
Yeah,
suppose, as to
yeah, yeah,
how
yeah,
near
yeah.
compulsory it should be?
Absolutely. I mean, I think any industry that's got that heat has the ability to make themselves look very good in the local community. You're providing somebody with future-proof, low-cost heat forever and ever. I mean, it's a very nice thing to have, and you'll create a goodwill feeling in the community. I think it needs to be part of planning, but I also think it needs to be almost part of the marketing and the green strategy, the marketing strategy, the community wealth, the giving back, the good news story. I mean, it is a fantastic opportunity for these companies to create that goodwill and good message. Yeah, let's face it, we've been lacking in a lot of good news stories lately. We could do with something that, it'd be fantastic to hear of a data center company that was like Deep Green have said they would do and give their heat for free. Okay, you still have to charge because you got the pumping costs and the pipes and all the rest of it, but that's a hell of a lovely gesture, and I would imagine that, well, I was getting kind of cheap heat from my local data center, I'd be raving about them and giving them a thumbs up anytime I could. So yeah, I think it's a good marketing ploy and against the whole greenwashing stuff. It's actually tangible and real, but importantly, I think it needs to be part of legislation and planning, because it's all very well having relying on the goodwill of others, but until you've got the big stick to say, well, actually, your goodwill is not required, let's get on with it.
Yeah, and presumably with the AI explosion that is driving this huge data center growth, and therefore the massive increase in power demand, do you think, as more or less to the point you've made there, it's almost essential for data centers to embrace this idea of waste heat reuse, so that
Yeah,
instead of people saying, oh, you're going to build an AI hyperscale
yeah,
1 gigawatt factory and take all our power away, all the rest of it,
yeah.
they can turn around and say, well, actually, not only are you not going to be out of power, but we're also going to give you this free or low cost heat. So do you think it's a sort of no brainer from that point of view?
An absolute no-brainer. And it's also a necessity. We don't have an endless pit of electricity. We don't, we are more and more reliant on weather patterns for electricity. And so we've got to find a way to decouple um, electricity demand and heating supply. And in the depth of winter, those winter months when you get, a very cold, big anticyclone comes in, very low wind, freezing cold, everybody whacks on their heating. So so data centers with that amount of heat continuously available all year round, heat networks have the ability to store that energy in thermal storage. So you can size thermal storage to heat a city for a year with no additional input. So you can outlast weather patterns, you can outlast seasons. So you're 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, you're taking heat from the data center, and whether the district, the industry, the city needs the heat or not, you store it. Your storage, I mean, we're talking massive thermal storage. The one in Finland is the world's largest at the minute. It's a cavern underground caverns, and that can heat the city for a year. So we've got the ability to do that sort of scale. So what that does, so when you get that anticyclone in the winter that comes in, and there's no wind, then if you need the various heat pumps and dotted around you've now taken all that electricity off the grid. You may have industrial sized heat pumps as well as the data center, and you might and rather than running those heat pumps when the electricity price is high and when the carbon content of the grid is high, you start to empty the store instead. And then when the electricity is cheap, the wind is blowing a hoolie and nobody's using electricity, so the price of electricity is through the floor and it's as green as anything. Well, you can fill your boots then. You can have your data center heat filling up, then you can have your heat pump, you can have electric boilers that are used for grid electric balancing, filling up this massive thermal store for use when that wind stops blowing again. And so it's been able to decouple the supply and demand from the electricity grid, that's getting the electricity grid guys excited about heat networks. And so if data centers can facilitate the pipes in the ground at this stage, then you start to bring in all the benefits that heat networks can bring on the grid balancing side as well. So it's yeah, like I say, from a whole system energy approach for the UK, data centers could be the catalyst that just gets us pipes in the ground, because that's the critical bit. Once the pipes are in the ground, it doesn't matter what supplies the heat. You know, it's heat agnostic. It doesn't care where the heat comes from. You can have 100 heat sources, and they can change year after year after year. So you're not relying on any one. But if the data center can be the catalyst to get it up and running, and then you can start attracting other industry into the network, into the area that the network serves, and the energy center, then you can start growing and building and becoming resilient and meeting the energy trilemma and securing a future for now and evermore.
And presumably, in the same way that in the early days of renewables, there were sort of subsidies and incentives for folks to get involved. Do you think that's the government needs to do that to get people up and running, and then it
Yeah.
will quickly
Yeah.
sort of gain momentum? Or
Yes, I think certainly as a sweetener to get people kind of started, and then they can get confidence. Because once you see this in operation, it sells itself. You know, it's the ability for, if you're on a heat network, the fact that you don't have to care about where your heat comes from and how we're going to do this in the future. What happens if it's a very simple bit of kit that's in your home. It's mechanical kit. It's a plumber, a heating engineer to fix it. It'll very few moving parts, so it lasts 20 odd plus years. It's a couple of grand to replace. It's not expensive. And so that if your choice is a heat pump in your home or a heat network connection, what we've found in Denmark, where they have those two options, is that everybody's choosing heat network. So from a social point of view, and taking all the onus off the resident to do all the expensive servicing and replacement costs, you take that away. So data centers can facilitate that. And once people start to realize that, and it might take time before they realize what a good thing heat networks are, but once they do, it starts spreading and ballooning, and people, 70% of Denmark are now connected to heat networks, and the people are queuing up to join. So, like I said, data centers could be that catalyst that we need just to get up and running.
well, it's been brilliant to chat, and some fascinating insights into the opportunity there, which obviously everyone's talking about, and maybe its progress is not being made at the rate we require. But Simon, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, thoroughly enjoyed it, Philip. Thank you.